The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. And now, Coach Bill Clark.
Welcome in. It's the Bill Clark Show, presented by Buffalo Rock, Dr. Pepper, along with Molly Robinson, Landrum Roberts. I'm Pat Smith. Coach Bill Clark for the next 30 minutes. Hopefully will inform and entertain. And, Coach, big topic of discussion on our show this week, as it is each and every day, is the NIL. You had last week President Trump coming to Tuscaloosa. He met behind the scenes with Tommy Tuberville, the senator from Alabama, and also Coach Nick Saban. Do you think anything is going to come of this in regards to President Trump, maybe an executive order, kind of maybe giving that guardrail for NIL?
Well, I think the conversation is started, and that's what we need. We've been having it, we've been all around, but it's going to take something up here. You know, and we were talking off air. Okay, the players, you don't blame them in the current sense of trying to get what they can get. The school's spending whatever they can spend to go get who they can get. But if we could create some guardrails, whatever those are, and we got a lot to talk about, but yes, guardrails, I think it is being talked about, is being discussed. I was talking to a coach yesterday who used the number 40 million for 5 or 6 schools. That's not what we really, 40 million. When the average now was 15 million, I think it's creeped up 21 million. Obviously, we got the House settlement. So lots to talk about, but to that point, I'm praying.
If we're building this thing, Coach, and we want reform, we want, if you want to call it reform, or just say, put in something, barriers, guardrails.
Yeah.
Where do you start?
Yeah, so for me, even if we said, we said this early on, whatever the contract is, that it really means something. There's a contract in place. I heard that where they're going to be bound for 2 years or whatever that is. Whatever that let's start with a contract. Let's eliminate tampering. Where if somebody calls you, and you're going to have to create some enforcement somewhere for something that says if somebody calls somebody while they're under contract, there's a problem. I was listening to somebody who I like who said, coaches and players are the same, and they're not. Let's talk about a coach. A coach, his responsibility is so broad. It's players. I used to say this all the time. I've got to have my players act right all the time. They got to get their degree. I'm responsible for all those things. I got to have my coaches act right. Oh, yeah, and we got to win. So comparing that to a coach who is under contract, there's going to be a payback somewhere. So that's what we're talking about here. What can we do to have a contract that means something, that if the contract is broken, there's a payback, there's restitution to this place that was agreed or whatever, there's a grievance, they took my player, we get some money back. And just to cut the tampering out and also the constant going back in during the season, creating those issues that take away from the game, that create bad actors. That's a good start.
There's ways for guys are going to find to cheat and finagle the system. But from what you've seen or people that you have talked to that are currently in college coaching with the tampering issue.
Yeah.
Do you make it consequences for whoever gets caught tampering? Maybe it's the individual. Are we talking show cause? You can't ever.
Right.
What's the solution?
Well, let's just look at the NFL. Let's go to a pro model that has worked and worked for years. There's a ground-based payment. That's standard across the board, which would even out, at least create some parity. There's tampering rules. And I told you the story. I was talking to a coach who was coaching with the Giants, and he said he ran into a guy in an airport for another team. He said, I would not even look at him. He said, I would not look at this guy because if somebody took a picture of us, anything, we go lose a draft choice. And, then he's out of a job. So there's got to be some consequences somewhere, for something, so can we create some consequences where there's a contract, the contract is signed, what is the length of time? There's got to be restitution to the people that we've put this guy on a contract, and also there's got to be a tampering clause in there to your point.
And I think it all comes down to whether they're going to be considered employees or not. Talking about student athletes. Because if they are considered employees of a university, then all of a sudden you can have collective bargaining, and you can have certain things that you can detail that will have a little bit of bite and teeth into whatever penalties somebody might be able to enforce.
When we talk about this with Coach Safely, I want everybody to have the Coach Safely course that's, paid for, sponsored. I don't want the youth coach to have to pay for that. I want it given to them, but it's just, it's like the speed limit. It's 55 miles an hour. If we don't have somebody out there enforcing it, how many people are going 55? How many people are going 100? So what's that? Now that's life or death. So what are these things? Do we need some teeth? Even whatever those teeth are, some kind of repercussions, because we're in a world. The big thing, we're in a world where winning is so important to that university.
And to that point, the hypocrisy is everywhere. While you have coaches that are either internally or going and being outspoken about it, and they all start with, I believe that athletes should be compensated. And I think we all agree with that. But they're complaining about not having guardrails. It's the wild, wild west. But at the same time, they're feeding the beast
100%.
that they're trying to restrain
100%.
by, we're going to cut state income tax on your $3 million. Don't even get me started on that.
Right.
Your $3 million you're getting to play quarterback this year at our school. Meanwhile, the father of 5, who's making $30,000, gets taxed every single penny that's taxable from that state. They can't afford to take his kids and his family to come and see you play on a Saturday.
You got to have common sense. And I think we've heard that from, our president, but you've got to have common sense. There's got to be, and I think that's what I said, the coaches across the board that I know want what's best for the players. If there is a way to compensate, and I know there is a way to compensate these guys within constraints of what's fair, taxes. That's, you're making a wage, you should pay taxes on that. And something that can be kept up with. That there are rules, and there's something that happens when you break the rules. There's got to be, if you don't have rules, just like we're going to go play football without officials. You got to have officials, even though we may not like them, but you got to have them.
Are we doing them any favors? Because now, not only are you getting paid, in some cases, a lot of money. I realize that all student athletes are not getting paid the same, but what are we really doing them any favors? Where now we're creating this fictitious world that doesn't exist anywhere else except for college athletics now, where you're not paying income tax on that crazy amount of money. You don't have to show where you're using your name, image, and likeness to promote something. You're just getting a payment for play. We're taking all of these other things that apply to everyone else in real everyday life, and we're continuing to pad these kids and give them this environment that's just not real. Yeah. And once you realize you're not going to the NFL, then reality is going to hit you, and it's going to hit you hard.
Well, let's just say we are paying them, and it can be a great sum of money, but then you're an employee, and what goes with that? Just like any of us, we have rules, we have a contract, we have a code of conduct that we have to follow, and that's fair. And also, if somebody wants to go try and get involved with somebody, and we've all agreed that's not going to happen. All these member institutions have agreed that's not going to happen. Then when you go outside that, you got to pay a very stiff penalty. And then let's say you've signed a 2-year contract or whatever that is. If there's a point of contact in there that we give them a chance to contact, and you leave, then there's got to be restitution. Just common sense things. That's where we got to go. And is it $40 million, and you got these schools down here spend $1 million? Or 500,000, whatever that is, or 40 to 20 million. Yeah. Where is it that we're going? Where we have that the game is not just who's got the most money, and that's where we are now.
Well, and how it's affected other sports, especially because we have so many more programs that play at the D1 level in basketball. Now you have programs that are proud programs that can't even compete right now.
Yeah.
Even at the most modest of levels in the transfer portal market for another Division I player, and they're having to go to, if you want to call them secondary levels, to find players because they can't compete. That's how upside down the market is.
Well, it's like, I had a dad ask me the other day in the gym, said, my son is he's got some D2 offers in basketball. He said, but he'd really like to have a chance. He'd like to go walk on. I said, them days are almost over at that level. Now, it's raised the level of that Final Four because you got 12, 13 guys who are great.
Yeah.
But you've eliminated the walk-on. You've eliminated those things. So it's just, when you hear the same thing throughout the country of something's got to change, something's got to be fixed, I think hopefully that's getting to folks up here, and can it be something that we can live with and agree upon? That's going to be the question.
It's about being smart. And one thing's for sure about your banking, you can head to Smart Bank, and that can take care of you immediately.
Yeah, something I was thinking about last week, we did this with Donahue. We were talking about Chris Donahue. I want to start talking about some folks like at Smart Bank. Lee Smith, who was at Compass Bank for years as a president at Smart Bank right off 280 here in town, and just running a business the right way and caring about the people there and caring about the customers. And I think when you can put a face and name together with a business, and when you got a leader who's doing it the right way, and Lee's doing that over at Smart Bank.
So, Coach, let's talk about the ecosystem and what we anticipate may happen out of the House settlement. I was talking to someone that graduated from Providence College, and there's no doubt that the Big East Conference in basketball is one of the top-notch basketball conferences in college basketball. And those folks are really looking forward to the House settlement because since they don't have a football team at Providence College, they can spend a good bit of their money for their basketball roster. Meanwhile, all the Deep South schools, they're having to spend the majority of their money on what? Football, as opposed to spending as much on basketball. I bring that up because there's been a lot of people calling us and asking us what's going to happen to the American Athletic Conference, what's going to happen to the Sun Belt Conference, because we all know that we are coming to a point to where the Power Four is going to absolutely take this whole thing over. So what does that mean for the ecosystem of college sports, especially in college football?
It's not good. I mean, it's truly not. This is not hyperbole. You're going to see teams drop down. I mean, you're going to see teams go down to FCS just over financial reasons. And especially as you get to, and I get some of that, but you get a president who doesn't really believe, who is not willing to go fight and say this is important, and and they're going to start dropping down. They're going to start finding ways. You're going to see programs go away or drop down at the best, go away, and maybe that will wake some folks up. Because then it's just, you got your Power Four, and then you got all the people below it, and that's where we're headed.
And it's not like it hasn't happened in various sports where you go back in the history books and you say, "Wow, they won a national title in what? When?
Right.
What happened?" Well, it was the evolution of college athletics and what it's become today, and it's certainly not all bad. But to your point, it's not just going to be the throwaway programs like, "Hey, I didn't realize they competed in that sport.
Right.
They're terrible every year." It's going to be noticeable programs that have had recent success that unfortunately have to come to grips with there's just no longer feasible to compete at that level.
Yeah, and what's that we hear about issues that are a high percentage, people believe this, 80-20 issues or whatever you want to call it. People that know, people that have loved this sport and lived it, which is, mostly our country, how do we get to the place where we are now from where we were? There was a middle ground to be found if we would have just had good leadership. And we didn't. We didn't have good leadership at the NCAA. We didn't have good leadership from ADs. And I've said that as a head football coach, we didn't have good leadership from head coaches, And I look back with regret, and I was like, well, that's really not, In high school, I was that guy. And I was there, and I spoke up. But, it's like, man, we let this thing, and we were being warned. And we had 3 years of this is coming. Now, we were all going against it. I mean, think now, when you get 100% for something, somebody's going to disagree. The immediate eligibility and the paying players without guardrails, 100% of the coaches voted against. And the NCAA did nothing. Nothing.
You mentioned the high school level. Kind of a side stop here. What are you hearing on that level as far as NIL? How prevalent is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's coming to a degree, how much. And, we're seeing, I think some of the things that we're seeing is parents started being willing to move. Now, they've always been willing to do it to a certain degree, but willing to move their child for a better program, a better whatever. I think that's more prevalent.
But they're seeking a deal.
Well, now, that was just a winning program,
right?
Facilities.
Good education.
Kid's going to get on the radar of
whatever that is.
It's a high-profile team.
Yes, yes. Now we are adding in a financial part, and you're getting a college team involved, to help place a kid Now, listen, that's been going on.
Sure.
I mean, that's been going on to a degree. It was, help find an apartment for a kid over here where we can, where, he's close to us. That stuff's been going, just not to the degree it is now. And once again, you say, well, at least we got high school. At least we got high school. And I always laugh when I was at Prattville, people were like, well, you started getting all these players, and we really didn't to the very end. We were winning, but we were a county school. Now what we did have, we had a really good school. We didn't have a lot of money, but we were a really good school. And by the end, they started coming in as youth players because they said, man, Prattville's winning. And so we were getting a lot of people out of Montgomery. So that's happened since. And I used to say, if you show up at my office, of course, I'm just not going to hunt you up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I always said, Ben, the guy that he's coming to is living across the interstate from us. You think he's not going to call and check and, just like I would do on my own guys. So it just wasn't good business and it wasn't very smart. Now, a guy showed up in my office and I've had times where I've call the coach across the road and say, look, now your running back is sitting over here. I'm letting you know. Now, he moves in, it's all fair.
Yeah.
I didn't call him. But my point on that's happened. Now, though, as you start adding financial enticements, it's a different story.
I want to go back to what potentially could happen to the smaller programs. And you mentioned maybe dropping down to the FCS, but there's some very proud Group of Five programs that have prided themselves on competing with the big boys, so to speak. They schedule them, they play them, they have success against them on the field at times. But what kind of jagged pill is that going to be for certain programs, even in the state of Alabama? And we know the programs that are not going to be able to compete on the level of the Alabama and Auburns. How are they going to be able to deal with this?
It's going to be tough. I think, and I've told the story for us, everything we built was family. It was, we're going to train you great. We're going to be a family. We're going to do stuff together. We're going to grow you. We're going, all these things that hopefully would keep a guy at our place. Even when people came calling, because, they could call, but they had to sit out, or when they got to be a senior. That was what I wanted to overwhelm anything else. Plus, that's just how I love doing it, And then to see where we are now, and you were talking about it off the air. I mean, I've got to think about my family, and I could go put $300,000, $400,000, $200,000 away for a house. Now you're forced to look at that. Yeah. You're forced to look at that. So, but thinking about these programs dropping back down, it's sad. It's sad.
Because how many of those programs would say, you know what, we'd rather just not even have a program because we cannot take this hit from a PR standpoint because we believe ourselves. And listen, I'm just using Jacksonville State as an example. Mm-hmm. Jacksonville State had incredible success at the FCS level. They come up to the FBS, and they've been a very good program since they've been at FBS school. But there's no way, shape, or form that they could even compete remotely with what's about to happen. Yep. So then they have to consider themselves, okay, what is going to be the best foot forward for us as a program? UAB has to ask themselves that same question. South Alabama and Troy, the very same thing. Do they have enough, I guess, of the feeling of, in the long run, we want this program to survive, but we're going to have to make that step and go backwards instead of forwards?
I would use Jack State, because I know all the powers that be there, and they've made the decision. We're going to be the very best we can be in this space. We're going to use student fees. We're going to do, and that's the question for me for all those guys. What do you do to say we're going to be the very best in that space? The problem is, okay, you got those folks who are saying, okay, we're good to be there. It's the people that have been in the middle, like what I thought we could be at UAB. We're going to knock on the door. We're going to get up there to the top 25, and we're going to get up there and have a really good team and have a chance to upset some folks. And, if I can really focus on a game, against somebody really good, we've got a chance to beat them. And versus now it's, because they're 2 deep and they're 3 deep are your guys. They go out and buy your number one guy who you developed. he's their number 2 guy. And just like we were talking about with basketball.
So do you create another division? Let's say not drop down to FCS, but you take the Power 60, Power 65, so to speak, the Power 4. You have those teams at the CFP level, and then you create a whole different division, and then you have FCS, kind of a buffer between the FCS and the upper tier of college football. Would that be something that the UABs and the Jacksonville States, the Troys and the South Alabamas, would they consider that?
Yeah, I think I would have been one of those guys before saying no. We're going to fight it out. We know we got less. We're going to schedule one of those a year. Now, though, it's a whole different world. It's a totally different world. Whenever the average is $20 million and you're spending $1 million, or if you're lucky, $2 million, or I say that will be. I think that's going to happen. I say it's going to happen. I think that could be a good solution where at least they've got – I know I was using Jack State as the point. Hey, we're going to be the very best we can be in this space.
And I was not demeaning them at all, or UAB or Troy or South Alabama. My point is just financials.
No, that's all it is.
They cannot – under any circumstance, if you want to have the facilities that you're invested in and the student athletes, that you cannot compete, because there are SEC schools, Coach, and you know this as well as anybody. There's SEC schools that cannot compete with their own teams and their own conference.
Yeah, right.
About half the league, don't you agree, Landrum?
Yeah.
Probably can't even compete with the upper tier of the Southeastern Conference.
Well, I think it's – now, I would go flip the coin, because I think that's coming where we are. Now, I do go back and say, all right, let's look at really the investment, not maybe a Jack State, but a UAB. Now, I am going to call UAB out. Okay. We had a $1 billion campaign at UAB, $1 billion with a B years ago. And I said, wait a second, we've raised $1 billion and we don't have the money to do X, Y, Z? Wait a second. What? So then you go to leadership. And you say, who is keeping us from investing in our program? Now, there's people, I would say Jack State's, they're doing the best they can do. It's just, what is your wherewithal? And then how committed is your leadership? All the time saying we've got to do something we got to drive these costs down a little, from 40 back down to 20 or 15 or whatever that is.
Well, in some of these universities, these schools, they have ways, they have other ways that they can allocate, or they have resources, whether it's a medical school, whether it's a law school or research center, where they might not have ever wanted to intermingle the two, right?
Yeah.
We keep this pot over here, this pot over here. But at least they have that recourse in the coming days when we get this thing finally settled. But then when we heard it from somebody, it might have been out in Texas A&M, where it was the president of the AD that said, I view our football program as the front porch to our university.
That's it.
And I saw it even at the Division III level with just having a football team, competing on Saturdays. Doesn't matter if they're playing Northwest, whoever state, that drives enrollment. And that affects enrollment for non-student athletes that are interested in your university. And when you pit a school that does have these programs available versus those that don't, I just wonder about the schools that don't have those other resources they can get creative.
Yeah, I think that's the question. Is that important? Is that front porch? That's what I said. We're not curing cancer, but we're an important front porch for your student, which drives student enrollment, which is the feel good. We know all those things. We believe in these things. The people that should be competing have got to invest. That level has gotten too high. There's absolutely no doubt. Now, these other people, can we create a spot for them, even if we can bring this down, but if we can't, for sure create a spot for them where they can compete and feel good about what they're doing and not trying to get up here to something insane that they just cannot match.
Well, one thing's for sure that's not insane, and that's Donahue Chevrolet. Once again, your Tahoe looking great as you're driving in the parking lot.
Yeah, and I think we're really going to go out and add a car wash dealership, even though y'all have not mentioned that. I've been getting a lot about.
Well, it's rained a lot, and I think it's washed it off. I don't think you've done it.
Right. There we go. So I'm going to have to find me a car wash, folks, and I have some. We got to go out and get some sponsorship. Back to Chris Donahue and Donahue. Appreciate those guys. And the Tahoe I drive around, and my daughter drives a Tahoe. We got them from Donahue, so those guys do a great job.
All right, Coach. Nick Saban in the news for a lot of reasons with President Donald Trump in Tuscaloosa. We even talked about it on our show this week. Could Nick Saban ever dip his toe in the political world? Has Coach Bill Clark ever been approached or considered a run at political office?
I have been approached recently, and I said, no, thank you.
Wait.
Recently.
Yeah.
Is this at the county level? Is this at the state level? Is this at the city level?
Federal?
Yeah. Federal.
Federal.
Federal. I said no. So
Did you get a security detail with this particular?
obviously?
Canine Protection Group.
Yes, canine protection.
America needs a spark, and it's Coach Bill Clark.
Veteran owned.
Spark Clark.
It was
I
a
like
quick.
that.
It was
Yes.
a quick ask, tongue in cheek. I believed, but no, absolutely not.
Not at all.
No.
I mean, even the common sense that you've been talking about with us for months on this show, you don't think that you could bring that to the political world and get some stuff straightened out?
No, I do not.
You're a uniform geek, like we are.
Yeah.
What colors would your signs be?
Yes. Your yard
You
signs.
got to have power colors:
Red, white, and blue, of course.
red, white, and blue.
Okay.
All right.
Do you like his slogan he had for you?
Which one?
America needs a spark.
No,
Bill
it's
Clark?
terrible.
No.
No, I'm kidding. That'd be good. Sure. I'm not doing it, so we can say whatever we want.
Well,
there's other words that rhyme with Clark.
yeah. Or Bill.
I'm glad y'all got off on this topic. Very good.
Well, that's what podcasts are for.
Sure.
All right. But speaking of when Coach Bill Clark becomes Governor Bill Clark of the state of Alabama, he will have the Canine Global Protection Group, a homegrown protection group
Yes.
that would be on his heels protecting him.
Yes, Auburn-based, Auburn Opelika, veteran-owned, canines at Major League games and NFL games and airports and keeping us safe. And we appreciate it.
Inaugurations,
Yes.
Yes.
campaign rallies.
Yeah.
Will we be invited to your governor's inauguration
You
ball?
would be. You would absolutely be.
You won't have to lift a finger. Me and Pat, we got your whole
Make it
campaign
happen?
planned out.
Yes.
Yep.
We got it
it.
planned out.
Yep.
We got your cabinet
Oh.
lined up.
Mm-hmm.
Your chief of staff's going to be Jack Crow.
Yep.
I got to laugh right in there.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
That would work well,
I like
right?
it. Well, that'll be a show. We have a show just on our on
the cabinet?
Yes. All coaches.
Yeah. Really?
Yes.
Every single one of them.
Yeah.
Your stump speeches. They're
Why
going
not?
to be great. That's when you're your best. You're
Give-
just going
give-
off the cuff, and you're an inspiration.
Yeah. Just a lot of free stuff. I want everybody to like us.
Oh, so you're just going to give away free T-shirts, hats?
Yeah. Whatever.
Oh! I thought you were talking
you're
about
a-
programs.
What did you think we were talking about?
I thought you were talking about more programs.
I could see him at the lake on a pontoon, on the back of a pontoon boat, giving like stump speeches.
On a pontoon.
Yes.
Instead of a railroad car.
Yes.
Pulling up to the
Yes.
marina.
Yes.
He's like, "Hey, can I have your attention real quick?"
All 5 people show
Yeah.
up.
Sir, you should really put a shirt on.
Right. But yeah.
We were promised
Please
T-shirts
vote
and
for
hats.
me. Yes. It was free.
He
Free
talks about
vote.
his free campaign, and
Yes.
here I am.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. So look very soon for the Bill Clark
Yeah.
yard
Yes.
signs
Yep.
Yes. I will have to think about our platform.
platform.
A lot of sports.
A lot of sports.
A lot of sports.
Well, speaking of that, quickly, Coach, Coach Safely, you guys hard at work and getting guys certified left and right.
Yeah, a lot of stuff to talk about moving forward. We've got a new law, Coach Safely law, but really there's going to be a new kind of a rebranding, which is Coach Safely so they will play. I mean, we've talked about that really, but it's why do we want to coach safely? So they'll play. And, we're so appreciative of these parents and all these coaches. And, of course, I'm a huge believer in coaches, as you know, but why not get trained to be safe, as I love to be in the no-brainer world.
Yeah, and there will be we'll have some information on this show about some events coming up.
Got some events coming up.
Yep, coming up that we will help promote and talk about. Well, for all of us here at the Coach Bill Clark Show and his potential run for governor, we appreciate you tuning
Be on
in.
the lookout. We got campaign stops and a lot of exciting news coming your way.
Website's going to be launched very soon. This is exciting times on the Coach Bill Clark Show, brought to you by Buffalo Rock and Dr. Pepper. Have a great week, everyone.
This has been The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper.